Brian, you want to open it, or should we let Griffin or somebody open it, or do you want me to open it?
And who would be the somebody?
I don't know. Somebody.
Surprise guest.
Yeah, hey, I do that. I do that every now and then. You just never know. So,
That is true.
I'll bring in like your ex-girlfriend from junior high or something, you know.
That would be dope.
So, Patrick, it's May 1st.
It is.
That means it's a 1-year anniversary of B.Friendly Fitness.
It is.
Yeah. Now I feel super honored.
Hell yeah.
And we will. Griffin Roelle is one of the earliest guests that we had to join us here in the back room, but we're gonna get to Griffin in a couple minutes because, it is the 1 year since we launched, which was May 1st last year. We've had some great support from some of you guys, and I think that a lot of people maybe have been newer to the channel or newer to following along more regularly, as we've picked up some momentum with the competition coverage we've done and some of the other things that we've been involved with. And so I want to try to be just a little bit better about reminding people, especially if they're newer, of the ways that they can support us if they like what's going on. And the simplest way off the bat is just, as you see on the bottom there, to support us on Patreon. We don't have any content that we're putting behind paywalls. That's not our intent, but we have some tiers that are available for you to support us there. And it's not very expensive, $3-6 a month or something like that. Can go a long way with a lot of people supporting over time. So for those that have been doing that since the beginning, super grateful. And if you're new to the channel and want to just contribute a little bit each month to the cause, we would love that, of course. If you don't want to support in that way, you can subscribe to, that's a different one.
You're getting good at this, Brian. You are.
I think I see what's going on here. Well, I'm trying to figure it out. Oh, there we go.
Third time ever running like the show, like completely.
You can subscribe to our weekly digest. We just send out one a week on Fridays, just catching up on everything that we've done throughout the week. We know a lot of you guys have a lot going on, so that's a simple way to kind of stay involved with what we're doing on a weekly basis. And then, of course, we want to thank HGR CBD, who has been our primary supporter this year by sponsoring us on the podcast here. And you can use code FRED20, 20% off for all their products. You guys know what some of our favorites are: the Super Greens, that drinking, the Relieve Stick, super easy application to keep the muscles going especially after hard training days. So please, if you haven't checked them out, consider it. They make great products and have been a great supporter of ours.
Griffin, do you use CBD for any of your recovery or anything like that?
I did for a while.
Yeah.
I used CBDMD before they actually got into CrossFit. And they got into CrossFit, paid everybody up. And I was like, well, all right, whatever. So I haven't in a while, but I used to. It really helped with my sleep recovery.
Okay.
But I'm also, people can do whatever they want, but THC, I will tell you right now, is terrible for your sleep. Actually, just pure CBD will actually have you have much better recovery. But THC will interrupt your REM sleep cycle. But people are like, oh, I sleep better. Deep sleep cycles get fucked up. So
it might put you to sleep, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's high quality sleep.
Yeah.
And then just wanted to update you guys on we've been, we announced our world tour for 2024, 2025 a month or two ago, constantly making some revisions to that. And the latest edition is that we're going to be working with the Fittest of South Carolina this year in June from Greenville. It's the 21st through 23rd. This competition's kind of cool, actually. It's only obviously for athletes in South Carolina, but they use the Open and the quarterfinals as a qualifier. There's a lot of good athletes down here that I've gotten to know over the past few years, being involved with the Crash Crucible and Crescendo, Fittest of the Coast, and the Charlotte Classic. So athletes that are in South Carolina can be looking for those invitations based on their performance in quarterfinals to be sent out this week. 12 total divisions this year. Articles up on B.Friendly Fitness if you want to check that out. We've been working with them in the run-up to that in terms of the programming, the floor layouts, and of what it's going to look like. So that'll be streamed on B.Friendly Fitness YouTube. It's a new addition to our competition schedule. So I wanted to let you guys know about it. And that's just all the updates. Thank you, Griffin, for being patient with the intro there.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I try
It's a
to
way
include
better
them in
intro than what I do with our podcast. I'll tell you that.
Well, I would say, and some people listening might agree that consistency is not our strongest suit, maybe with the travel schedule that I have and all the different time zones that we're in and whatever else. It can be hard for us to schedule, shows at consistent times. We're trying to get better about it. And that's another thing that I really struggle with. Like when we have a guest on, I'm excited to talk to the guest, and I usually dive right into it and I skip over all that stuff. Usually Patrick hits it at the very end, but I think that I can be better about it. So hopefully today was a good start to year number 2.
It sounded pretty good to me. We normally open up with like some Jocko quote and start roasting each other, and then we forget what we're talking about. So like that was way better than what we do.
I think what it is, eventually he won't need me anymore, and that just frees up my time to go hit up that noon class. So
Griffin looks like one of your athletes this year, Stella Ray Atwood. I know who she is.
Yeah, well, yeah, she should be in school. It's one. Yeah, she should be in class. What is she doing?
Lunch break.
Whatever.
That's just exactly that's the effect you have. We announce.
You throw an AirPod in and you sit like this at your desk. No one knows what's going on.
Stella, pay attention to your teacher. Stop watching.
So, Griffin, I'm sure that some people listening know a lot about you, and others may not know at all who you are. Specifically, this week we're having you on the show because I'm actually coming to see you on Friday for a Grid League training camp that's going on, which we will obviously talk about. But before that, just for people who don't know, can you give us like 1 minute? Who is Griffin Roelle? Maybe a little bit of background. You said you played some football. You've had some success in CrossFit, and kind of bring us up to where you're at present day.
Yeah. I guess quick scoop. Ex-football player, played 18 years, almost played for a few different NFL teams. Didn't work out, didn't have those contracts that I wanted, ended up going to the CrossFit Games in 2015 to see it. My uncle invited me out there. Saw the tennis stadium, and I was like, I've got to do this. Of course, they changed it from Carson anymore, and I ended up competing in Madison, but still fine. But ended up training in 2016, started doing CrossFit, started coaching too, got L1, all that stuff. But from then on, went to regional sanctionals, all that stuff, made the games on a team in 2018, individual 2020. And then I've just been competing since, and now I'm starting to shift into coaching a lot more. Have a lot more athletes. I kind of enjoy giving back and coaching athletes just as much as I like competing, but as you get older, you have to take a small step back. So that's kind of what's going on this past year. Has been a lot more coaching going on with Blacklisted HQ. And I have obviously a teen athlete, what we just brought up, Stella, who's sitting right in a quarterfinals, finished 17th in the world. So has a good shot at going to the games, the teens. And then I've got a few masters athletes, got all kinds of people all over the place that, hopefully in the next year, 2 years, 3 years are going to be able to make some noise in the space. But Can you tell us a little bit about Blacklisted HQ? I mean, this is a term or a training program that you might see if you follow the CrossFit space pop up every once in a while. But what's your relationship with them, and what should people know about them? So it is an individualized program as well as a general program. Essentially very similar to ends up being like Proven or Mayhem or CrossFit Invictus or TTT, like any of them. But we do it a little bit differently. We're a lot more athlete focused on, obviously you can tell, you see all of these athletes post everywhere. We don't really talk about us as coaches as much. We want to be pushing our athletes and drive that a little bit more, but that's what it is. And we are building that community. We have a pretty fun community right now. It's competitive, but just a lot of young people trying to find their way in the space, whether they want to be games athletes, semifinal athletes, just local RX athletes, right? So we don't turn anybody away from that. But we're mostly trying to build that community as much as possible. But I'm one of the head coaches there. I actually write our general program along with individual stuff. And yeah, I mean, if anybody's actually in town ever and they need somewhere to train up in Atlanta, let me know.
What do you mean by that? Is Blacklisted have a headquarters there, like an actual gym, or is it just your gym?
So it's we have a space out of a gym on Saturdays, and I didn't start the company. Kyle Spears, who is an X Games athlete, he was on a few different teams. He used to actually coach a training think tank previously, but he's had hub spots at different gyms in Atlanta around the area, and ultimately build enough revenue so we can have our own space. One thing that I also like doing a lot is I coach for strength and conditioning. So like this year I have a lacrosse team. I had the same team last year. They won state last year, potentially could win state again this year. They're in the playoffs right now. So I'd like to combine having a CrossFit space, but also a strength and conditioning for sports. I just did that for so long, and I have a big passion for helping those kids in high school or even middle school trying to find their way into college.
Dude, that actually makes a huge impact. I'm not sure if you know this about me, but in 2015 through 17, I was teaching in high school, and I was the head coach of a soccer program down in Texas, and worked with the kickers on the football team, and implemented CrossFit style training into both of those kind of programs. They, in Texas, sports is a class, so you actually get the kids all year round. You might get them, for a majority of the year through what you offer as well. And it doesn't have to be, just the ability. Ben Bergeron spoke about this years and years ago, to integrate some methods from CrossFit into sport training generally makes those athletes, especially as they're developing, a lot more resilient.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Obviously, depending upon your sport, you change certain pieces of those aspects to help train them better for their sport. So football, I used to coach a football team that ended up actually going to state as well. So right now, if I can find one more school and go 3 for 3, like at this point, it's proven. But
3 data points, that's what you need, right?
Yeah. Well, I am hoping, obviously, the lacrosse team runs it back and wins state again. Right now, they're ranked number 1 in the state, but we all know how high school sports go. So
they're probably recruiting there.
Well, up here, sports are a big deal. Baseball, football, lacrosse now. So honestly, all the sports up here, and this is Georgia, but we call it the South, right? If your kids aren't playing sports, they better be geniuses.
Do you have any idea the inspiration for the name Blacklisted HQ?
Kind of, yes.
There's
a story behind it, as all dramatic things go. But I would also say, like, just as it kind of sounds, being like blacklisted, legitimately just having people turn you away because they, for whatever reason, good, bad, indifferent. And that's actually something that I've found, and you don't want to be negative about it either. I want it to have a positive outcome of the word. But it's for all those athletes that are essentially not given those opportunities that they probably earned or deserved, just because of someone's feelings or because somebody has more money and they push them away and they don't get those chances. So that's kind of like, it's just as Justin Kotler calls them the underdogs, like essentially blacklisted athletes are the underdogs, the guys that just don't get that shine, don't get the light. And you gotta bring them up and grow them up and teach them. So
this guy Augustus is going to give you a hard time all show. He shouldn't be proven like that. We're blacklisted, but we're the underdogs. And maybe also for coaches, because maybe coaches that could fall into that category too as being blacklisted. It was interesting for you to just kind of put that kind of background of Kyle, that he had worked with Training Think Tank and he created Blacklisted HQ coming out of that, because Max Alhaj used to be linked up with the OPEX guys, and then he left there and he started Training Think Tank. And I think that when you're really close with a situation, something like that can be very personal. It can be offensive. You can be, it can be, like you said, potentially dramatic. But again, this is something that I used to listen to a ton of Ben Bergeron stuff, like 2014 through 18. I was digesting, besides the CrossFit Journal stuff, a lot of stuff from Pat Sherwood and Ben Bergeron primarily that were putting out, I thought, a lot of good content back then compared to some. Now there's so much content out there, but it was more limited. But he talked about this with CrossFit New England. He's like, I had coaches here that would leave and they'd start their own gym and they'd take a percentage of our membership with them a couple of blocks away. It's next town over. But that's kind of just the progression of how things go. And Max he felt like he gotten all he could out of OPEX. He went and started his own thing. And Kyle, maybe similarly, I don't know either of these stories well. And athletes might find themselves in similar situations, right, where they think something's going well, and then their coach takes on another athlete, and they feel like they're being pushed to the side and whatever. And it sounds like those are the types of people that you guys are wanting to be there for.
Yeah, I mean, just people that need a home that don't get a home. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can spin it however you want.
This guy must be a hoot in the courtroom.
100%.
So there's a little bit of background on Griffin. As you saw, Patrick, if you were watching, scrolling through some of the stuff, in addition to competing at the CrossFit Games, you've also been on the demo team there. And so you've had a variety of different kind of ways to integrate with the CrossFit scene at the highest level. And I would guess that that's valuable for you when working with athletes, to have all those variety of different experiences. And then, like you said, you're coaching some athletes in the masters and team divisions. So we'll get to the grid league in a minute, but kind of through your experience with the CrossFit ecosystem so far on the athlete side, coaching side, demo team side, all these different angles, and seeing what's been going on this past week or two with a lot of people being frustrated with the current ecosystem. I keep seeing these people saying that CrossFit is dying, but then I look and I see Mike Halpin post 20,000 additional registrants for quarterfinals at $50 a pop. That's $1 million. Do you think this sport is dying, or do you think that it's just still kind of finding its way?
No, I don't think so. It's still finding its way. It's still new, and people they jump to conclusions, and they're getting their feelings and immediately start making reactions. And now with social media, you can say whatever you want anytime. And I mean, ultimately, like, the sport's not dying. It's not. There are poor decisions being made sometimes, along with all sports. I like to equate this to the NFL. Took a long time to keep building and building, and still they have issues they have to fix year to year. Yes, I would say CrossFit's not efficient right now or consistent at making these changes. But they have made good ones in the past. And then, well, they keep having changes internally that I don't think people know about, that are making these big inconsistent things happen. Being a part of the demo team, I got to see how the dynamic works. And I got to see two different dynamics from 2 different years, and they were entirely different based on who is involved and who's running the show and all of that stuff.
Basically, whether Dave Castro was there for one and was not for the other.
100%. If we want to be straight honest, it's whether Dave is there or not. 100%.
Yeah, and I mean, look, whether you've had intimate relationships with Dave Castro or not at any level, it's not lost on anyone what kind of organization that he runs. He brings a lot of his military upbringing to the table, and it's an environment where you fall in line and do your job, or you don't last.
Yeah, for sure.
He's found a ton of success in his life doing that, as have many other people. And it just, if you're working with him, you just know that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was very eye-opening to me last year. But just as you said, like with businesses, they have to grow and continue to grow, and you have to expand on those. And if you're stuck sitting in the same ways that you've always been, you might have a little bit of struggle when you're trying to bring on new people, new clients, new people that want to be a part of CrossFit that have never seen it. You have to keep growing and change along with what's going on. So, yeah, I don't think the sport's dying ultimately. There's just a lot of changes that need to be made. And unfortunately, people bring the sport down in poor ways, and then others are lifting it up, and you're going to have that battle constantly. Ultimately, my best advice for everyone that is going to be a part of this sport is give it some grace, but also you can be hard on them, but being negative for negative's sake doesn't help anyone. So everyone that has criticisms, I get that. But sometimes you have to bite that bullet and decide not to just be a jackass. And just say whatever the hell you want. It doesn't help anybody. Just go scream in your bedroom. Like, get that out, right? And find a way to be professional about it. Which same goes for how some responses come from HQ. 100% on that side too. I'm not really necessarily defending them. I'm just kind of being the middle ground for both.
No, I think if someone has the capacity to just kind of sit back and watch what's going on and take in the content from the athlete side, the coaches side, the media side, CrossFit HQ side, you probably are going to come away and say, I think everyone could do a little bit better here.
100% in all aspects. Yeah. And unfortunately, with changes that were this year, whether you want to dive into that or not, it changes how you have to coach and how you structure programming going forward. 100%. If this is going to be the change, it had a consistent driving source, and now it just veered left really, really fast. So I'm very interested to see what they decide to do with the semifinal workouts. I don't think I had a problem with them doing the quarterfinals the way they did it. Obviously, reviewing, we don't have to go there. It was terrible in all aspects. It just was. There's a better way to do it.
I do have to say the people doing the reviewing, they are working hard, and I don't think that they are doing anything wrong.
Correct. 100%. 100%. They are doing a job they've been asked to do. It's just like yelling at your trash service for not showing up 1 week because maybe it wasn't them. They would have been there, but it's their company. Just like I don't know. Like, it's not their fault. Or like the waitress at a store, somebody, like, it's not their fault. It's probably management. So don't go after them as individuals. But yeah, that needs to be fixed for sure. But ultimately, you have to look at what these tests are. You had 4 tests, each are worth 25%. That is a big difference than when you had 5 tests.
Yep.
And as much as people want to argue me on this, we did not test strength. We tested a battery test, which is still, and look, I still scored fine on that. I'm not worried about that. But what you tested was 2 workouts that are extremely similar. You put 50% of your tests there. Got birthday balloons?
These new I don't even know what to call those. I think they're I don't understand them. If you like start counting and you count with your thumb, you're gonna get a thumbs up symbol. It's just so weird. Well, I did want to ask you about one thing.
Yeah.
Because clearly there are a lot of athletes that are frustrated as a result of what's happened over this past week or two. In most sports, when there are frustrations on the athlete side, there's something that exists for the athletes to collectively go to the table, so to speak, with the organizing body. I think most people know the PFAA exists. They are an entity that has remained basically silent during these last 2 weeks. I haven't seen anything from them. But I'm curious, as an athlete, who's been around the sport for a while at a high level, do you see anything like that coming soon in our sport? Because even if you go back to the year where Greg Glassman makes that tweet and you just get a series of athletes saying, I'm out, I'm out, I'm out. It wasn't all of the athletes saying I'm out. It's not all of the athletes that are frustrated with what's happened this season. But if I'm CrossFit HQ and a couple athletes, a dozen here, a dozen there are frustrated, but I have 25,000 people that have signed up for this competition, 30,000 that have signed up for this competition, I'm not stressing those dozen. If I'm CrossFit HQ, I don't care about if Nick Matthews stops doing CrossFit or Sydney Wells stops doing CrossFit. But if all 200 athletes that were competing at semifinals are like, this isn't right and something needs to be done, or none of us are competing, then maybe there's a chance. Do you see the potential for something like that in this sport, or is it too far off right now?
Yes and no. So a couple of different points to that. The PFAA, unfortunately, has to be. You have to. Here we go again. You got to be funded, right? Like, ultimately, the people that are doing the PFA, which I was helping Brent with small things last year and the year before, trying to help make changes, especially being on the demo team, giving a few thoughts to them, and trying to help them make some changes. The problem is every athlete is trying to be a full-time athlete or balancing your work life and being a professional athlete and doing all these things. And now they're the ones also running this organization. So you're asking them to give up the time that they don't have. So what my imagination, which I didn't message Brent or Pat or anybody like that right now, in the past 2 weeks, they probably were pretty busy. And they also, this is the hard part, is if you're an athlete and you say something wrong, they can hold it against you. It's happened before. Unfortunately, even to some of the best athletes we've ever had in CrossFit. So probably also that side of it, being careful. So the balance of that is getting enough money to hire a few people that aren't athletes to advocate for athletes. And the athletes go to them and they become a part of it. One thing I had offered and mentioned, I was on a, whatever they called it for HQ, helping them with the teams and basically giving them ideas on how to keep making the sport better last year. And one of the things I said is like, have you thought about having an athlete liaison that is legitimately a middle ground? And this is like hired from HQ that works for them. And they are the ones that athletes come through. And you sit at the table and you give ideas on how to make this sport better, because ultimately your sport grows as the athletes grow. And if the athletes don't want to show up anymore, your sport will start to die in that aspect. And you just go back to the grassroots thing that it was, but your sport at the highest level is going to die at that point. CrossFit will not die.
Yeah, and it's like, I threw a couple names out there, and I think that it's worth kind of following up. Athletes are going to phase out of the sport eventually. They're just going to get too old. The playing field will catch up to them. A new generation will come in, whatever. But athletes like Sydney Wells and Nick Matthew also have created names for themselves by being competitive in your sport, and having them, as advocates for your sport is beneficial. It keeps their communities engaged. Because for every Nick Matthew there's that's competing around the world, there is a community of people. Some are smaller than others, but that's training alongside them, that's motivated by them, that's inspired by them, that follows their journey. And when I was talking to some athletes last week, this was kind of the conversation that we were having back and forth, is that, every year there's turnover at the CrossFit Games. Not all the same athletes make it. But it seems like with what's happened this week, that there are a fair number of athletes that are basically mainstays at a semifinal. Some of them also at the games, and then therefore also get opportunities to compete year after year in off-season competitions that people watch. So you're talking about maybe the 5, 6, 7 biggest competitions of the year, where you're getting used to watching these people over the past 3 or 4 seasons. And then the impact that they have on the community starts to grow and expand. And when you start to miss, 10 or 15 of athletes that fall into that range, that's where it starts to feel like maybe they should care a little bit more.
Agreed. I 100% agree. This is something I've argued many times, is yes, everybody loves to see Tia or Justin or any of the top 3 that are pretty much there most of the time, right? But your sport doesn't run on those 3. Mm-mm. Your sport runs on the rest of the field that is there. If you don't have them, you don't have a competition. And yeah, you can fill them with other people, but nobody cares if they're not good enough to compete against them.
Yeah, and this is the question that I've been asking since 2019. In 2019, clearly there was influence from Greg Glassman in terms of the way the games was run, and there were some clear flaws pointed out with it, just in terms of the context of what we've known the sport to be and the way that points were distributed and the weighting of different workouts that year. And you ended up with a top 10 competing through the weekend, which could be super dramatic and exciting from one perspective, but it could be a group of people where you're like, I don't know if these are the top 10. And it felt like that more than anything that year, especially when you look at 11 through 20 on both men's and women's fields. You're like, man, there's like at least 5 names in there on each side that I really would have liked to see compete those last days. Mm-hmm. And then come to the end of the weekend, and CrossFit's able to say, our job is to find the fittest on earth. We give you Matt Fraser and Tia Claire Toomey, job done. And since that moment, I was like, okay, well, is this what this sport is about, finding the singular fittest? Because I'm pretty sure that there's a ton of people out here that actually care who finishes 2nd and 3rd and 8th and 10th and 20th and 33rd.
They would only have one spot at the Olympics if that's what mattered.
True.
To be on the podium and get a medal is people can die happy and never need that gold medal taking silver or bronze. And yeah, like, again, I'm all for the if you ain't first, you're last situation. But like at the end of the day, one person gets to win. And that's why you have a drive to go back and try to go win. I get that. But if you
we're not
care,
saying that not everyone should be wanting to win. Like that, of course. These are high level performers, high level competitors. But there's other things that you need to be sensitive of. Now there's a big percentage of revenue for athletes that's based on sponsorships, because some of the competition earning is limited. And in some of those contracts, you get a bonus if you finish on the podium, top 5, top 10, top 20, or if you make the games, or if you make the semifinals. And because we've seen some big name athletes miss in recent years, there's been reworkings of those contracts. That it's like, if you don't make it to this stage, you lose money relative to what we were planning to play you this year. And some of those athletes just missed a stage of competition that neither them nor their sponsors thought was ever going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, your test changed, but so again, what you're looking at ultimately is CrossFit needs to make more money. And that's what they're made this decision on, to do 4 workouts and to make them the way they did, is to get more people to sign up. Because in previous years with the quarterfinals, you had people who saw the workouts and they were like, I'm not signing up for this. Right now, we opened it up to 25%. You need to also allow those workouts for them to test so you can make more money. So they're going to go sit down, and obviously if they made more money this year, you can bet they're going to stick with this style, right? Like, that's what makes the world go round in business, is money. So just be prepared if that's the case.
What if I gave you a little pushback on that? And I said, despite these 4 tests, the best athletes still seem to be the best athletes. And they, prior to the quarterfinals happening, I didn't publish these lists because I don't think it was necessarily needed or fair. But I made a list for myself of the 40 men and women that I thought would make the semifinals in the West, East, and Europe. And despite everything that's happened, I got at least 30 right in each of those regions. So it's like, even with these tests, it seems like they're still generally finding the best out there.
Again, generally finding the best, but you're going to see a different test at semifinals. And I will tell you right there, just as we just discussed, you're going to see all of these athletes, if they tested for a much more old classic CrossFit athlete, not needing high level strength, right? Obviously you don't have so yes, agreed. Your top 10 are your top 10. That is exactly what CrossFit says. Those guys are what you're going to get because they're at that level. But if you add another workout, if you change one of the workouts, you're going to see other athletes that make that semifinal. And then obviously, as we know at semifinals, I'll give you an example. Vigneault from last year was not in the top 60, slid in by some penalties, and then made the games.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. There are athletes that will do much better in live competition than online. There's athletes that will do much better with 10 tests than 5, and there's athletes that will do better with 5 tests than 4.
Right, but again, their argument is, we're looking for the fittest. We don't care. Be able to attack anything that we give you, and that's that.
Yeah, and I think it's a valid conversation, because if you look at most other sports, there's an understanding that, yes, in Major League Baseball, there's 32 teams or whatever. But they also are supportive, and their system is set up to support the AAA, the AA, the single A, and those systems have continued to thrive and do well, and been an opportunity for athletes to compete when they can't make it onto one of those 32 exclusive teams around the world. And you see, if you follow baseball closely, you'll see that sometimes there's people that play for a decade in the minors and then eventually get their pro debut. And that's, one of the big driving factors for B.Friendly fitness, quite frankly. That's why we're doing these world tours. That's why we're going to places like Atlanta for a grid training camp this weekend, which we're going to start talking about very soon. That's why we do Fittest of South Carolina, even though it's reserved to a competitive landscape for one state out of 50 in one country out of 200 that are doing this sport of CrossFit, is because there are people that are passionate about the minor leagues, about the community, about the foundation that supports and upholds the top end of our sport. And we have been proactive, but also, privileged to have the opportunity to integrate with more and more of those communities around the world. And I think that at some point, the organizing body for the games also needs to, and it's like, look, I totally get what Dave is saying. It's the 4th year of quarterfinals. We're less than 20 years old as a sport. But at the same time, we have a lot of lessons learned from other sports and the time that we have put in that I feel like we could be applying some of those things in some progressive ways now. And we don't need to necessarily have the excuse of, we'll change it next. We'll change it next year. We'll change it next year. So I kind of straddle the line on that, but in terms of them being, it is a young sport, but I think we've had enough experience and can draw on other experience that there are some opportunities here to tap into what I believe is still and I think that they would say too, the driving factor for this thing, which is the community competitions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I mean, just going around and helping these athletes, like what you're doing is great because so many of these athletes don't get that time. They don't this helps them grow. For instance, just as you were talking about like minor leagues, if you don't have that support, you don't see one of the greatest stories of a quarterback going from a arena league and going and winning a Super Bowl with one of the best offenses of all time. Kurt Warner, if nobody knows who we're talking about. You don't get that. You don't get that. And yes, those are few and far between, but that story will be a forever type of story. And that happens, but you have to have the support and help going around and doing these things.
Dude, and I mean, look, after I come to see you, the next week I'm going to Greece for the Athens Throwdown. This competition is taking place 1 week before the semifinals in Europe. There's over 1,200 athletes that are going to be competing there. They got 2 competition floors, 3 days of competition. They're actually hosting it in a former Olympic stadium from the 2004 Olympic Games.
That's so sick.
And the top prize purse is 10,000 euros, which is, we don't even know the prize purse for semifinals yet, but that was, $10,000 is what it was last year. And those minor leagues competitions are providing earning potential. You'll see some athletes who will compete in Athens because they have a better chance to win money and earn money there than they do the next week, even though you're also going to see them in Lyon for the French Throwdown.
I think what we're seeing is with what we're doing is Brian's kind of exposing like another option for athletes. And we talked famously about this, and you can talk about this with your experience with Grid, but there are other options. Yes, CrossFit is the main option, but I kind of compare it to like the Hooters Tour versus the PGA Tour versus the Live Tour. I mean, there's other options. There's people. John Daly has made a career off playing off the Hooters Tour. The guy, and you have other athletes that play in that. I don't think it's called the Hooters Tour anymore, but you know what I'm talking. It's like a lesser level, but they're getting, they're earning $5 million a year. But if they're at a PGA, they're going to make maybe a couple $100,000. You're not getting that prestige. You're not getting maybe all the sponsorships with being a PGA player. However, but you are getting the winnings, and I think because our sport's so new, where you are seeing an increase in prize money outside of the CrossFit season. Like again, Brian said 10,000 euros when we don't even know what the prize purse is for semifinals yet. And then you have something like North
Augustus. I do think that Luka Jukic will be actually in Athens, despite also competing in France.
Good for him.
Yeah, but
he's not the only one.
Yeah, but Luka is a prime example. It's like he's made a home in the Middle East, and he goes around. He goes to all these competitions, Eastern Europe and the Middle East, and he's making bank, And if he makes the CrossFit Games, that's good. But he knows that he can go to these competitions, build up his, and he's also getting to know all these people in this new part of the world.
He becomes like a celebrity there, and in the Middle East, I was there with him for a couple different competitions this year. All of the local people know who he is now, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I got to meet him. I knew him. I got to meet him because I knew his brother from Dubai in 2018. But when I went to Norway, he was competing, and after we were done, he was talking to me, and he's like, "How do you do this?" I was like, "Honestly, I don't even have sponsors. I work so I can do this at that time." And I was like, "The best thing you can do is go to some local competitions that are paying money and go win them.
Yeah.
Go win that, and then you'll get more money, and then you'll have someone be like, hey, maybe it won't be a big time money sponsorship, but let me pay for your competition for you to travel to Greece or whatever, right? And build and do. I mean, obviously working out with his brother, he's just gotten better and better and better and better. And Also, Luca's a great human being, so
Yeah.
I can't say enough good things about him. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I thought the same thing last year. I was like, well, if you keep doing CrossFit, you keep chasing this. I mean, I won an event at the games, and I ended up still, I think, going even or not making money that year. You know, like it just that's how it goes.
And there was
So
there was a 2021, I think it was. Alexander Caron, 26th at the games, lost money on the season.
Yes.
Spent more money for registration than he ended up winning in competition because he came through, I think, the last chance qualifier.
Which he had to pay money to be in the last chance qualifier. That's ultimately what it was, like $150 to be in the last chance qualifier, and that's actually put him in the hole.
Yep. Go win money at other competitions. You know, you can go win.
All right, we're gonna leave this picture up here for a long time to ask this question. Remind me what grid is again. And that is the main reason we had Griffin on the show. We, of course, knew that he would have a lot of insight into a lot of other things with the experience that he brings. But you've also been competing in grid recently. I'll be coming out to Atlanta, if you guys missed the start of the show, this weekend to do a training camp, cover a training camp with you guys for the Atlanta Wild. But for people who may not know, why did you start competing in grid, and what exactly is it? How can you simplify it for people who might not know?
Okay. Well, I started... That's a long story. I'll keep it shorter. There's trials. They do trials every year as like tryouts, and teams will ask you to be on their team if you do well enough. But I did it because I could make money. If you win the workout as an amateur, you got $100. If you beat the pro, you took their money and also made $100. So I would take $200. I think there was like 10 or 13, 14 tests, something like that. And I typically did almost all of them, and maybe didn't win every single one. Pretty close. I mean, I even did like the 25 total bar for time and took money for that one. So like there was ways to make money. And I was like, I actually did that, I think, the first time so I could make money to go to Norway to compete, which is what got me to the game. So like I found another way to pay for it. But every year I did that. And then finally they're like, hey, look, are you gonna be in the league or not? And I was like, if I can find a way to not lose money, because I already lose money on CrossFit, then I'm in, whatever that means. If I break even and I don't lose any money, I'll do it. So one of the teams.
So are you one of the pros now? So I can come and beat you for money?
Technically, yeah.
Patrick's laughing at me. Well, I was just,
I'm picturing you like there being like a double under crossover workout, and then you beating Griffin and taking his money.
I mean,
I don't think. I would say that I don't think there's any workout I can beat Griffin at, but I did beat John Young in a quarterfinals workout. So, you never know, I guess.
Nice.
He is the fittest.
No, but I mean, I didn't actually know that about the like beating the pro. I'm not sure if you've seen, but Taylor Self and Sevan are doing this Kill Taylor series where it's like, he just comes out, he does a workout, and you have a chance to log on live. And if you beat him in the workout, you can win $1,000 this weekend if you happen to beat him on the workout. Otherwise, you get shamed for losing to him perpetually.
I think you just brought up a great point that Grid could potentially run something like that, where it's like more like what they're doing with Taylor, and making it much more visible. Because the trials, essentially, you're just submitting a video, and they'll review it, but you don't know what the scores are. And then they'll go through it. Obviously, if you win, you make the money. But you could do it like they do, and it could bring a lot more attention. I mean,
that could be really cool, because when you entered the Grid League, maybe people knew of you through CrossFit, but maybe there's a guy that's just like you, just as good as you, that just shows up. He hears about it from a buddy. He shows up.
100%.
And if that was broadcast, then it's like, well, he's made his mark before you've even seen him at a competition.
Yeah. I mean, that would be super cool. And that would also help the sport grow. I would also say that, so like Grid, what it is essentially, you have a match, just like a basketball, football, any sport game. You have two teams, and they are going to race. You have a designated amount of races per match. The races, race number 1 will always be, it's called partner forward. It's always partner forward, no matter what match you're in. However, the movements are different. You do know ahead of time what they are. I don't know the exact amount of time, but like a month or so, you have plenty of time to be prepared. And that allows your team to practice what your fastest splits are. And based off of the data, you will put those 2 people in, or whatever that is. It could be 4 people. All the races are different. Okay. So you have those 2 teams. You race down the grid. If you win against the other team, you get 2 points. If the other team finishes under the time cap that they must do, they get 1 point. There is a rule of if you beat them by 20%, they get 0 points. Right? There's one other rule where you can throw a flag and it's a bonus flag and you can get 3 points out of it if you win the race. But each race, there's certain rules of how many people you have in each piece. And what they do is they put it up. If it's on YouTube, they put up the race. They show you what it looks like, what the rule is, how it's going to flow. So you can understand what's going on. And you always are moving down the grid. So you are watching the race happen and you know who wins and who doesn't. It's very clear. And at the end, whoever has the most points wins. Obviously, there's overtime rules and all that other stuff based on points. But that's kind of what it is. You have CrossFit movements. You have higher level gymnastics in that than you do in CrossFit. Obviously, you can see like some of the stuff. You got ring muscle ups with a med ball. They're constantly trying to nuance and add new things that will make the race more exciting. You have barbell ladders, but it's for people that don't know what it is. They can watch it and don't even know what's going on, and they'll still be like, "Wow, this is pretty intense. This is crazy," and grab your attention. And then you might start watching it because this is actually kind of cool.
So yeah, Audrey summed it up. Racing at what you're best at.
Yeah, 100%.
How many
something and go.
How many players are allowed to be on the team?
I think it is 20. I think it's 10 males and 10 females. But I also think you only can have a certain amount of active players per match, and there's rules on who you can activate or keep as reserves or whatever. But yeah, and then there's a certain amount of people that can be in each match and be like essentially starters. If that makes sense.
Right. So competition to competition, there's a coach or a manager or something that will, see who's available maybe, and then try to set up their team with roster for success in that match based on maybe the workouts, availability, skill sets, etc. And my understanding is that there are basically strong men and women, body weight specialists, and generalists.
Yes, or what you would call a CrossFit athlete, essentially.
And where do you fall?
I am which is what the term is utility player is what they use. And that's what I am. I'm not the strength specialist. However, I am the strongest in the sport.
So there are guys on your team that are designated as strength specialists.
Yes. And actually we have a guy that is stronger than me in certain things now, which is what it should be. Grid used to be the NPGL, which was a pro sport. They didn't do a great job of managing money, and it collapsed, but it was very, very big at the time. And they did have numbers like Klokov did it. He was in it. He was in the sport, and they had numbers that like even I'm looking at like, ooh, that would be really tough.
Someone asked about the Klokov here.
Yep, it was. There was a thruster ladder. I don't remember what it ended at, but he was the only one at the time that attempted it. I don't know if he actually did it or not.
He won the race basically.
Yes. Yeah.
Friend of mine down in Florida, Lee Pinkham. Griffin may be insanely strong, but how far can you throw a champion plastic Firebird? That's a disc golf reference, and of course I had to include it.
I don't know. Probably not further than people actually do.
Is this believable?
Golf, if you don't throw it correctly, it's not going to go super far. It's going to curve.
Is this a believable number for Klokov?
90. What is that? Yeah. To end the thruster ladder, was it 385? Was that 385?
Something right around there. Yeah.
Let's see if I can find it.
400.
Our good friend Jeffrey Birchfield, he'll throw a champion Firebird around every once in a while. Yeah. As you roll, you were talking about the league in general. After the collapse of that sort of thing, the Grid League was almost relegated to just Florida for a while. Mm-hmm. And this year, I believe they're expanding back out to what's now being called the United Grid League.
Correct.
anything you can share with us about the evolution of that, or as much as you might know about it?
Yeah. Ultimately, enough athletes are interested in playing this sport that are outside of Florida. Like, hence I am. Like, I'm not from Florida. And there has been enough athletes now. There's a lot from Texas, a lot from somewhere out, like, are decently out west. So if you can have a team and start managing to build that, it made sense. And at this point, it made sense for them to start expanding it back outside of it, but in a controlled way, right? You don't want to just open it up and try to collapse it. You're going to slowly move it forward, and keep adding teams outside. So we have the first team outside of Florida, which is the Atlanta Wild. It was previously the Gainesville Wild. So our hub is up here, actually. So it is, it's exciting. We got a whole new jersey.
Will there
whole new
be?
logo,
Do you know
all
if
that
there'll
stuff.
be any matches in Atlanta this year?
No, but the first one that will be outside of Florida. It will be in Vegas. It will be at Mr. Olympia is there, right?
You'd
cool.
have to tell me on that one.
I think it's Mr. Olympia. I don't think it's the Arnold. Maybe it's but it's at that convention, October 11th, 12th, whatever that weekend is. It will be at that convention. They run all of these races, other than sometimes one they host at Valor Fitness's headquarters. The rest of them are at convention centers that have all of these other things going on. So people that are walking around can come see, which is pretty smart, pretty cool.
Sure. It's definitely. Elise Carrerao just got here. Is Griffin competing this year? Do you want to answer that, Griffin?
In grid, yes. In CrossFit, yes, but not at semifinals of the games. However, there's other CrossFit things I will be doing this year. Haven't quite decided on which ones I'm going to be doing, but luckily,
if you're seriously, mean this, and I mean this for any other athletes that are listening. We've been saying it. If you are looking for places to compete, please keep us in mind. We have good relationships and a good pulse on where a lot of competitions are. Some of them are only through the qualifiers, which limits the opportunity, but there are others that are open registration and have some prize purse money. There's others that you can get an invite to. Those competitions are generally kind of aware of what's going on, but if you or other athletes are wanting to kind of be maybe bumped to the head of those lists and you think you have the credentials for it, let us know. We'll do what we can.
Yeah, for sure. That would be great. 'Cause yes, 100%. I also want to get back involved in team things as well. And the CrossFit side, they are extreme. I'm a team athlete at heart. I only did individual in CrossFit 1 to see what I was really about as an individual. And I really don't care for it. I really like team stuff way more. I will still do individual. However, team is where my heart is. And I would like to do more stuff like that in the off season for CrossFit things too. So yeah.
PC, are you going to play this or are you just teasing us?
I mean, I'm waiting for you guys. Do you want me to play it? I'll play
Send it.
I think everyone wants to see it. Did you happen to see what year this was from?
It was 9 years ago. At least the video was 9 years ago.
They just cut away from his feet there because everybody knows what a thruster is.
Yeah, that was the heaviest weight for the ladder. He's the only one to finish it.
And the first shot that Patrick had there, you could see that those stands are full behind him. Like that was a spectacle.
Yeah.
I mean, who's not going to show up to see Klokov race through some barbells?
Yeah, that's pretty legit.
We talked to Justin Kotler, who had, obviously was part of it. I think
he was also the top comment on that Grid League post from January that you pulled up.
Of course. I mean, the guy, he still talks about like how it was a great idea. Just again, like Griffin said, just financially some mismanagement, but it was there. I mean, you're getting Matt Fraser, you're getting Annie, all these people were being signed to these deals and making an announcement of it. And just, for whatever reason.
Absolutely unforgivable. We've never had a CrossFit competition mismanage finances.
No, not at all. None at all. Not at all.
So Griffin, how has your role in the Grid League system or team evolved? Are you, in a more of a leadership role by title or amongst athletes, or do you just kind of prefer to be, one in the crowd?
I kind of so this year it seems like I'll end up being a little bit more
Do they have captains?
Yeah, yes, they do. Technically, they do. I've always been a lead by example kind of guy. I've also had to learn in college. I had to be much more vocal to be as a captain. Typically, every team I've ever been on, I ended up being one. But last year, obviously, that being my first year, I just kind of was a part of the team, tried to kind of let that happen. And there wasn't a match where no one was really saying anything and shit was falling apart. And I said, fuck this, I'm about to step in, and started changing things. And I think people started looking at me differently after that, because that's just what it is with team sports. Someone's got to sacrifice. Someone's got to step up. So this year, I would assume that. I would also hope that we have some other people be stepping up. A lot of, especially the females, I think in the sport, are looking to Amanda Fisher. She is disgusting at grid. Absolutely disgusting.
Hey, I mean, I saw her compete both team and indie at the Fittest of the Coast back in January, and she's no joke. I mean, she's improved quite a bit. So
the gap, yeah. When I went to see her last year, before this is kind of when I started at Blacklisted, before semifinals, I needed some people to train with. She wasn't too far away, and there was a major gap between her and I at that time. There's not that much of a gap anymore. She has closed it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I have more. For most athletes, I just have like a surface level of understanding of their fitness, and I don't get that intimate every day in the gym with them like you might have had with her, or got to see that progression. But I noticed in January, I was like, ooh, she looks better. She's breathing better. She's moving better. She just felt more well-rounded than the last times I had seen her.
Yeah, I felt this would have been an example of the Vigneault situation. If she made semifinals, she might be going to the games. She wouldn't finish on the podium. She wouldn't be top, but sure. She closed a lot of holes and a lot of gaps that she had that showed up last year that are not there anymore.
Yeah, and I mean, we saw it last year where we had athletes that were qualifying in the 40s, 50s, 60s that were competing for or taking game spots. If you go back to the first year, I believe, of quarterfinals to semifinals, we even had Bailey Roelle, who was outside of the top 120 in North America. She gets to the semis, she gets to the games, she finishes in the top 20 there. And it'll happen again this year. There's athletes that will have qualified in the bottom 10 in their region that'll be fighting for or take the game spots. But we also know that there are athletes who are in those 50s and 60s and maybe even the 70s. By the way, that's been the case in Europe every year. They've never gotten more than 60 spots. They only got 40 this year, but there were athletes that you would look that were 68, 75, 84, and you're like, man, I would love to see that person in a live competition, because I have before, and when they're out there, they do really well. But we knew the system. We knew the system. I don't know if you've seen this stat, because we've talked about it and I've written about it, but 10 years ago, over 400 North American males and females made it to regionals. In 2018, that number was 200. And now it's 80. And that's why for the past month, I've been harping on this message of, hey, athletes, the game season, yes, there's more people who can participate in quarterfinals, but for the people that are serious about doing this as a profession, there's less opportunity than ever before. There's less spots at the semifinals. And I mean, how many people did you know when you first started doing CrossFit 2015 through 18 that their only objective was to qualify for a regional?
Almost all of them.
Yeah, that's where the meat is. Well, you've taken that away. The games team has taken that away for whatever reason. They've put the more emphasis on the quarterfinal, less emphasis on those people that are on the fringes of making a semifinal, less opportunity than ever. That's why I keep saying, hey, reevaluate what your goals are. Making it to the game, the semis, that's great. I can totally understand and support people who want to do it. It's harder than it's ever been before. Not only are the athletes better, but the spots are fewer and the tests are less consistent and predictable. And there's just these obstacles that could come up that can be completely out of your control, as we've seen over and over again. That's why I'm pushing to these out of season competitions, because there's so many of them that are so well run, that are organized by people who are incredibly passionate. You know, we just I don't know if it's been posted yet, but we partnered with this competition in Serbia, the Belgrade Games. It's the second year they're running. They got a cool thing. 7,000 euro, 3,500, 1,500 is the prize purse. The male or female division that has more people participate gets an extra $3,000 euro prize on top of it for first place. Again, these competitions are providing opportunities for athletes to do what you told Luca to do 5 years ago. Go out there and compete, earn some money on the tour. And guess who else did that before he ever made it? Matt Fraser, up and down the East Coast. You can hear him saying $500 here, $1,000 there. It adds up.
Yep, 100%.
It reminds me of was it Billy Madison? Or Happy Gilmore, when he's just going playing all these small tournaments, getting these checks. And
one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, it was on the other day, and I was like, man, it just it kind of correlates with that. Sorry, little Happy Gilmore.
No, 100%. Anytime Adam Sandler needs to come into the light, always say it.
Yeah, but I mean, it's kind of similar. I mean, granted,
no, 100%, 100%. And like with Grid, there is an opportunity to make money. It's again sponsor stuff. You have to build that so you can put sponsors on jerseys and things like that. So it's a little bit different than like with CrossFit. You can go to them and say, hey, like, look, we can put a nice fat logo on the chest and help sponsor an athlete for the year. But at the end of the season, you can win money based on if you take essentially, there's like utility player of the year, strength specialist of the year, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I won rookie of the year last year. And then also if your team wins the championship, you guys split the prize purse of that. Not a ton of money, but it is money. So this is another, but I will also say this, it is a great way to, you're doing what you're already good at. If you're a CrossFit athlete, I will keep saying this to people. You don't have to change any of your training. If you are a high level CrossFit athlete to do Grid, if you're already a crazy good gymnast, guess what? You get to do the fun stuff that you probably aren't doing in your training anyway, because you're doing all of your weaknesses. So it doesn't take anything away from your training, really. It takes a day away from your training, but if you really, to be honest, volume wise, you could go train after or before.
In the case of the gymnasts, you actually will get to do some things that are probably for those types of athletes more fun than what will show up in CrossFit, because they'll program the double touch, the triple touch, the rolls to supports type of movements that we have not seen in CrossFit yet.
Yep. Last year I was we had a few.
They threw you out there for some triple touches?
Oh, I do it all the time. I actually could one of the faster ones. However, the cooler thing that our coach was like, do not learn this, do not do this. And I was like, all I heard was, you said I can't learn this. I'm 100% going to do this. And ended up paying off at the end of the year. We needed someone to do butterfly ring muscle ups. And I went and smoked them, 15 of them real quick. Honestly, I felt like I could have done 30 unbroken that way. It was fine. But I got to do some fun stuff too. Obviously, I waited till after semifinals to go ahead and make sure I do that so you don't blow out your pec, because they were like, we've never seen that large of a human do butterfly ring muscle ups.
Yeah, and
sweet.
And you're like, well, they told me I couldn't do it, so
yeah. Tell me what else I can't do. I'll do it.
It's and by the way, if you don't have the prerequisite skills, it's probably not something you should be trying.
100%. That's a very good disclaimer there. Don't do this. You can't.
Just like the butterfly pull-up. You want to be able to do a certain volume of strict pull-ups, a certain volume of kipping pull-ups, and there's a progression to those things. But a lot of the athletes who are doing those specific gymnastic skills in the Grid League have a gymnastics background, and it's something that comes fairly naturally to them. What would you say to someone who thinks that the Grid League is dangerous?
All sports are dangerous. I mean,
perfect answer. Seriously.
Yep. It is.
They are. Like, you sign up for this stuff. CrossFit's dangerous. The people get hurt every year. People get hurt. Football. You know how many concussions happen every single year? Almost every single game. Every single game there's a concussion.
They said the sport or the exercise or the movement that causes the most injury is running.
Yeah, knees.
Yeah, just running. People sprain ankles. People are straining calves. They said that's the number one exercise when it comes to injuries or movement is running. So that's my answer to people that would say, "Hey, CrossFit's dangerous." I'm like, everything's dangerous.
Driving a car is dangerous.
Yeah,
swimming in the ocean is dangerous.
Sleeping's dangerous.
Yeah, just then don't do it. You don't
watching golf tournaments can be dangerous.
Yeah,
live spectator.
Yeah, exactly.
With a ball.
Just you know what? You don't want to do it.
Is that Happy Gilmore reference?
No. I sometimes just random stuff pops up on the Instagram, and I saw this thing, and I don't know why it caught my attention, but it was some guy from like 20 years ago at the Masters, and he's like, "Is my lifelong goal to play there?" Shot number 1, I shank it left, hit a spectator in the head. Shot number 2, I shank it right, hit another one. Anyway, so this weekend, if you guys missed the start of the show, I'm going to go to Atlanta, hang out with Griffin for about 48 hours, and a majority of the Atlanta Wild team is coming in town for a 2-day training camp, right? Did that happen last year prior to your season?
We did it, I think around this time last year. It might have been like a week earlier. It was based off of quarterfinals, which were different for us last year. So it was, but it was before semifinals that we did this camp, because it's the only time we all get to train together and make sure we have like all our data and times down for who's the fastest at certain things. So we can put out the best, at least first race, and potentially looking into our second race. Because obviously people got to travel. So it's just like a practice, except it's 2 days.
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty cool to see. I've gone to the Atlanta Wild's website and looked at the roster for athletes for this year, and there's some names that are recognizable from the CrossFit world. There's some, and then there's some specialists in those different disciplines. So I think it'll be pretty cool. I'm going to try to get some coverage of the weekend for you guys. I'll do my best. I won't have any help with that, but I think we can get some cool stuff. Usually I got Patrick or Chad or someone who's a little more technically savvy than me, but we can get the camera out and capture some interviews, capture some working out, and give people hopefully a little bit of a taste of what what the Atlanta Wild team is like, and then they can kind of interpret that extends to probably all of the Grid League teams.
Some people might find their new favorite athlete. Mm-hmm. Like it's, again, you're looking at specialists. You're looking at people that are really, really good at one specific thing. And like, you might, man, I really relate. I really like what they do. That's super cool. And then you get to see what their personalities are. And then you get to tell a story about somebody somebody never knew. And you should. And
then when does the season actually start?
Our first match is July 6th. It's on Saturday the 6th. That is our first match. I think it's everyone's first match. Originally, I think they were going to have one the first weekend of June, which is the same weekend as semifinals. So
in the East, yep.
Yeah. So they ended up having to move that because they tried to plan things before CrossFit had put out their dates. So.
Yep. I mean, it's another challenge that off-season competitions face too, is trying to predict when the game season is going to be. And while there are competitions around the world that book venues and dates years ahead of time, the CrossFit Games usually doesn't give us that information, even if they have it until months ahead of time. And therefore, it can be challenging in that regard. But on the United Grid League Instagram here, you can see Patrick scrolling through some of the different dates that they have, culminating in, I guess, the finale, which is that one in Vegas, I think, on the 11th and 12th of October, and then the championship event the following month in Fort Lauderdale in November. So the season basically runs from beginning of January through middle of November.
Mm-hmm.
I will give I love, and I think I've said this a couple times, where CrossFit needs to partner with some of these events. And I love what they're doing, partnering with Olympia, partnering with the FitFlex Expo, stuff like this. I think it's smart. Why? And I know the reason why, because the Open runs concurrently with the the Arnold up in Columbus, Ohio. It usually runs on the same weekend, but they I don't know why CrossFit doesn't do something. I mean, if you ever been to that thing, the expo is just crowded with hundreds and thousands of people, and Rogue does their strongman stuff during that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But CrossFit, they had an opportunity a couple of years when they did the Open announcement with Justin Medeiros versus Saxon Panchek and Laura Horvath and Emma Lawson. They did at Rogue headquarters, but why they didn't do that like in the expo,
mm-hmm.
As part of that event, it was a missed opportunity. And I think what Grid is doing, we're partnering with some of these, fitness expos where you have the potential to reach so many people. I think it's why CrossFit's not even having a stand or vendor booth or something in there is beyond me. Maybe they don't, I don't know. I think it's a miss. But
yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's a great opportunity. I know last year the marketing for Grid exploded. With views, just exploded of just people watching every match, and especially in the Brazilian community, for whatever reason, they love watching Grid. I mean,
man, I wonder what it would look like. There's even though it's not going to get talked about to the extent that it will in North America, there are a couple really talented Brazilian athletes that got the short end of the quarterfinal straw this year. Also, actually, one of the women that I thought had a good chance to potentially sneak one of those 2 spots. Ended up missing even the top 40 down there based on a penalty. But if there's a big following there, like I think that would be a good idea for Grid to reach out to an athlete like that, see if they can, invite them up here somehow, help them get a visa for the season or something and compete, because that is absolutely a market that you can captivate with fitness.
Oh, I'm absolutely agreed. That's the one thing that's going to end up growing Grid the most is getting other personalities that are already known from some other sport, bring them in, that are obviously going to have to be pretty good at one specific detail of what they have to do, but grabbing that attention and bringing in some personalities, some more faces get to see it. I know CrossFit isn't always been super happy with Grid, but they're entirely different, and they can coincide. And they honestly could work together. They really could. Yeah. They're not stealing people.
No, it seems like it's working. I mean, Grid has been more accommodating towards a CrossFit, especially if you're a CrossFitter and, wanting to compete in the CrossFit game season. I think another reason why that you see that explosion in Latin America and South America is because, when they switched down to Florida Grid League, they had, with the Miami Soul, with a bunch of the teams down there, they had a huge Hispanic, a lot of athletes with personalities. And I noticed that, like, going through their YouTube channel, it's like, I mean, they have over 200,000 YouTube subscribers. They have videos with millions of views. And I think a lot of it's because they played they're just not playing to Florida or the people locally, they have that connection. They're having their athletes make that connection with, South America or wherever they're from, would it be Puerto Rico or, something like that. So they're doing, I mean, like you said, I've noticed it as well. Grid League's done a great job with their marketing, and I think they're listening. And I think that's one thing we brought it up at the beginning of the show. I sometimes CrossFit is known to have been tone deaf to the community, especially when it comes to the sport and the athletes.
No. They're very in tune with the tone, Patrick.
Yeah, but deaf. They're deaf now. Because, well, I wanted to say at the beginning, a lot of the frustration that's coming out is like, you always hear that thing, if you're going to complain, provide solutions. It seems like everyone's providing solutions, and any of those solutions will be great. But I think that, again, it's fallen on deaf ears, and it's frustrating. And that's what's making people frustrated, because for whatever reason, CrossFit, I don't know, they either they don't want to listen to those people, have those conversations, or make those changes, or because it's not their original idea, it didn't come from someone within CrossFit and under their umbrella, they just refuse to hear that or have those conversations. And that includes media. That definitely includes media, because, I had this conversation with Mike Halpin the other day. What happened to those press conferences that we used to have that CrossFit was always promising? I mean, Justin Berg did a great job. One of the few things that I thought that he did a really good job with is, like, he did have press conferences after each stage where he brought athletes in and he made himself available. CrossFit hasn't done that. The only thing they have is Dave's week in review, where you have to, where he picks his comments. That's the only thing we have in terms of two-way conversation between the media, and the media is your driving force right now, because CrossFit media is not getting it done. So all this independent media is doing it, but there's nothing. We're not getting.
I would narrow that down even more. So for other people, in the sense that there are people that do work for them, that are listening and want to make these changes, but they're not allowed to.
I know.
Right. But I'm not saying it to you. Yeah. I'm saying for anybody listening, because some people are like, oh, there are people that truly care. And why would they not work for HQ, that really want to make these changes and really want to make the sport better? But they're not the ones in charge, and they're not the ones going to be able to make that difference. But that's just kind of, unfortunately, that's where that is for a few people. There's just, at the end of the day, the top have to make some of those changes.
Yeah.
I think I saw there when you were looking through the Grid League Instagram, Patrick, that this year all the teams will be at all the competitions.
I think so.
Which is different than how it was last year?
Yes, because of the different divisions. Just like you have the NFC, AFC situation for football, it's kind of the same thing. But I believe we're putting them all together instead of splitting them up. Because last year when they did have that first event, it was the other division that they had their first event on the first weekend of June. And our division didn't have anything. So I think they're trying to put them all together to get even more eyes on the events.
Yeah, and it makes them like there's a little bit more of a premium on each one. It's like, if I go here, I'm going to be able to see all the teams do something, and then I have maybe a better pulse on what the landscape looks like. So kind of cool.
I will say the grid media for competitions, it's pretty on point. It seems like if you're a good athlete, and you have a competition, you're going to get some type of footage. You're going to get media that you can share and collaborate with, and help grow your audience and their audience as well. So I will say, again, I've been in Valor Fit. It's not in terms of lighting, it's not the most well lit place, but they do a good job. So bravo to them for doing stuff.
They are trying to make that change this year. It was a little too dark when they had it in the in the warehouse, but no, they do. Unfortunately, those all the camera people out there are on the front lines. I will tell you that they are up in your grill, and I'm not gonna lie, I yelled at one of them last year because I was sprinting down the grid as fast as I could, trying to go flip the damn flipper, and almost took him out. So, but yeah, they do a great job. They are all over the place.
All right, Griffin, any other thoughts on the Grid League or the training camp coming up this weekend that you want to share with people?
Honestly, I think anybody that's interested in watching fitness, especially fitness done fast and exciting things that'll draw your attention, if you've never at least checked it out, you should. It's run pretty well. It's pretty cool to see. You have a bunch of other ex-CrossFit athletes. There's some games athletes. There's a lot of great personalities to get to know. And again, you follow them, you're going to see them in other sports because they're all specialists. You might see them in Olympic weightlifting meets. You might see them in CrossFit. You might see them doing all these different types of things. So I would tell you to just start tuning in and watching and see what happens. I mean, unless you want to keep seeing me become a half-naked wood chopping influencer now.
I thought you might be training for like the lumberjack games or something.
Dude, I love chopping wood. It's great. I really do. That's a new axe I literally just bought.
Thought you were going to turn around and start racing up that tree like those guys do.
Well, someone was like, you should go into one of the lumberjack competitions. Sure, I'll do it. I mean, that's part of like a CrossFit thing, right?
Is there a tactical?
I think you could do some of those events.
Is there a tactical games for like medieval like weapons instead of like?
Dude, that'd be sick. I'm in. But I don't know. I mean, just as you said. I mean, if you want to start marketing and telling me the things to do, I will do it.
Yeah.
Do you have a good pulse for how competitive the team you're on will be this year? Like, are you guys one of the preseason favorites? Or
yes.
Is there...
So last year, everyone knew we were lacking on the female side, except for a couple females. But Amanda was in every single race. We on the men's side, I was in almost every single race. But our men were pretty decent. There's a men's and a females triad. We're essentially three, right? 3 men, 3 women, always on the grid. We didn't lose a single race on the men's triad, but we couldn't win a single female triad.
Wow.
And this year should be entirely different. Our team is, I would say on the men's side is bar none, the most overly stacked grid team on the men's side. Female side is a extreme upgrade from last year. I actually get to meet a few new people this weekend, both on the male and female side that I've never met before that have also done grid previously. Some really good athletes. So I don't know if they're going to come out with like rankings or anything, but I would tell you right now that you should be looking to see us at the championship.
Is there another team that you're kind of eyeing as the other favorites going into the season?
So Taylor Stallings, who obviously used to do CrossFit, she runs the Orlando Aces. They won it last year. They are a very good team. And as a team, she has built a phenomenal team. And I emphasize team because of the pieces and the way they work together. They didn't necessarily look like they were going to be the best team on paper, but they were really good. So,
it's more of an Oakland A's than a New York Yankees.
Yeah. I will also say this, all of the teams, I think this is the most signings or new signings they've ever had. So it'll be I'm interested to see what all these other teams look like. Because
so maybe there'll be kind of a leveling up across the board.
Yes. The whole league in itself has gotten dramatically better in the past 2 years. talent wise. So obviously, if you were to ask me, even if on a bad team, I'm like, we're going to do pretty good. I do really think that we obviously have all the pieces to go win the championship is the best way to put it. But there can be other teams that are also in the same running for that situation.
Awesome. Well, that was great, man. Thank you for taking the time today. I'm excited to come out there this weekend and get to know you guys a little bit, and hopefully provide a little bit of insight for those who are just kind of learning about it or getting re-engaged with it. Seems like it's a great opportunity for athletes and also for fans to see some stuff that, like you have talked about, is relatively easy to follow, pretty exciting, pretty quick. There's people that love CrossFit for what it is, but there's others that have some criticism sometimes about being difficult to follow, or long drawn out events, and Grid kind of tends in the other direction there. So I think
keeps your attention. You can see it, knock it out, and be happy. But also, if you need more of my actual unfiltered opinions about a lot of things this week, and I'm happy to share them.
We'll do that in the evenings.
Do you well, that kind of segues into how can we hear more about you? You mentioned a podcast, so
we do. So I run a podcast called Be the Exception Podcast. It's for Blacklisted. We obviously will talk about, like, I have one tomorrow, but we're not as fancy as you guys yet. We're not running them live.
Yes, nice. Thank you.
Tomorrow we're gonna review the quarterfinals, like what the season's gonna look like, probably go into the future, all that kind of stuff. But we also like to bring on athletes that, again, if you want to be great in anything, you tend to be the exception towards everything. So what that means essentially is I like to try to find people that are exceptions to a lot of rules. We had someone previously on that was an orphan from Russia. He was he turned into a Paralympic swimmer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He has cerebral palsy. He's incredible human. He actually went to my high school. He's much younger than me, but went to my high school. One of our coaches on staff is a phenomenal swim coach, has coached Olympians, and he actually helped coach him. So we've done all different kinds of things. We had a guy that I used to coach. He runs the exercise science department at KSU, who is studying CrossFit, and really wants to help show data to all different things about CrossFit because he loves it. So he has the facility to do so. So we had him on. We'd like to have him on again, but we try to find people that have different pieces to bring to the puzzle, that people really can connect with and learn some stuff from. But yeah, that's one way that we got some more information coming out about a lot of things from us and Blacklisted.
Cool. No. Anything else you want to throw out there for people? I mean, yeah. Any sponsorship obligations?
No.
Use our
no. I mean, I'm not the most sponsored guy in the world. However, the one thing I am doing differently is I actually am trying to find brands that want to work with us as a whole, not necessarily like, hey, pay me this money for every month and this is what I get. Like, I want people to be a part of what we're building, especially with what it looks like right now. It can be pretty cool. So I have a few contacts that we're working with right now, trying to build that up. But no, I mean, I just appreciate being on. And if anybody really if anybody's worried about me, I'm fine. I'm not leaving the CrossFit space. Don't worry about me.
You're not putting a black and white post out there,
whatever. Look, I had my 3 hours Saturday night when the first leaderboard came up after quarterfinals, and I was like, I'm done. That was it. That was too many points. I already know how this game works. When other people are like, don't worry, I'm like, if I take first place on the next 2 workouts, I won't make it. That's how this works. I know how this game plays. I've been around long enough. But I will also say, on the CrossFit side, for anybody that's wondering, I shore up a lot of holes that I was probably had for the past couple of years that are no longer there. Unfortunately, just the way the test went, we didn't get to test any of the stuff, but it could be really fun. We'll put it that way on some of these competitions that put out high level, high skill things. I'm not even talking about max lifts. I'm still on the side of, hey, nobody has to max lift ever again. I'm fine with that. I don't need it.
Someone asked me if there was a chance of seeing a lifting ladder at the semifinal this year, and I think that it's been a while since they've had one of those. Would you like to see something like that?
I think I think a great test would be, and this is actually similar to something in the Brazil CrossFit Championship. We had to do bar muscle ups first and do a snatch ladder. I mean, I know we just tested ring muscle ups, but you could test something in similar.
They tested ring muscle ups at all 4 stages of the season last year, so nothing's off the table.
So, but I would like to see, hey, people complain about 1 rep maxes, and I got it. I agree. Test a gymnastic that's going to separate a little bit, push yourself, and go run through a ladder that people can race with. You're just going to have to get the numbers right on that bar. But yeah, I think that would be really cool. And I think it'd be an exciting event. It would probably be the best event of the weekend for spectators.
Yeah, we'll see what they roll out. Of course, the semifinal programming will probably be released 1 week prior to week 1 of the semifinals. That's traditionally what they do, so we can expect it likely about 10 days from today. May 10th is what I would expect. If you are curious about what other people think about the quarterfinals programming, thanks for being with us. You can head over to Get With The Programming. They're doing their quarterfinals evaluation right now on YouTube. Peter Coffee Pods and Wads has a show coming up at 3 with Scott Schweitzer, Adam Klink, and Harriet Roberts for the Around the Whiteboard. And if you weren't here at the start of the show, it is our 1-year anniversary today. So thank you guys for all the support over the first year. Griffin, thanks for being here today, brother. Patrick, as always, running the back end. We'll be in Atlanta this weekend for the Atlanta Wild Training Camp. But we'll be back tomorrow with Kiefer Lamy and Kyra Milligan on the podcast, same time, 1 o'clock in the East. And hopefully we'll see you then. And until then, be friendly, our friends.